Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're gonna have our first ever couch chat. As you know, I am Laura Hooper of Laura Hooper Calligraphy, and this is Alyssa Law, the other half of Laura Hooper Calligraphy. She's not usually on our videos, but I thought today we would have a little informal conversation about what you want to consider before you start teaching workshops. So we've been teaching workshops over 5 years. I actually didn't start teaching calligraphy workshops until Alyssa came on board. So Alyssa has a strong background in logistics for nonprofit logistics for nonprofit events. So having her on the team has really helped, and she has some great tips to share with you guys.
Yes. So I think it's also important to note that Laura and I are sisters. So we get that question a lot as to how we met. So that's how, and here we are. As Laura said, I've been working with Laura full-time this is my 6th year. And it's also our 6th year of teaching calligraphy workshops. So when I first started with Laura, we had just launched our starter kit. There was no video tutorial. It was just our very first calligraphy kit to help people learn the art of pointed pen.
They basically had no idea where to begin, what supplies they were supposed to use, or even where to start. So we came out with a starter kit for them.
Right. And so that was in November, and somehow our first class was the next February. Is that right? Or was it a year later?
I don't know.
The
timing is a bit foggy.
It was all kind of a blur. But at some point, our friends at Carson Butler Events, Emily and Amber, they had encouraged Laura to start teaching, and they offered up their studio space on Capitol Hill in DC area here. We're in Virginia, but DC is right across the river. So they had offered up their space to us, and to be fully honest, Laura was basically petrified.
I was very petrified. So being in front of a room full of people in the beginning was my worst nightmare. So, well, not my worst nightmare, but it sounded like a nightmare. So, yeah, I wasn't looking forward to it. I was so nervous. We couldn't even go out to dinner the night before. I had to just go sit at home alone.
Yeah, and at the time I had very little, I had no knowledge of how to do calligraphy, let alone how to teach calligraphy. I didn't teach anything in those classes. I was literally there for moral support and to help Laura get through the class. But after having been in our first few classes, we did, I now teach all of the classes with Laura. So we split them, we both teach them, and we don't do any classes without both of us anymore.
Right. So you don't have to have another person to teach a class. I needed
it. Just kind of by default.
It helped me to have another person, but if you're a more outgoing person than I am and not an introvert, it will probably be a lot easier for you. So let's just talk about some of our tips for things you want to think about before you dive into teaching, or even if you're already teaching, maybe some things that you hadn't thought about that you want to consider.
The first thing you need before you start teaching is a curriculum. So for us, it really helped that we had the starter kit. We basically had an already written format that we were going to follow. So you want to make sure that you have an idea of what you want to teach, and equally as important, if not more important, the tools that you're going to use in class. So if you are sharing the art with other people, you want to get them set up with the best foot forward, basically. You don't want to set them up with tools that don't work well together. You want to test out things. If you are doing calligraphy, you should already know what's going to work and go with that. We have heard a couple of horror stories, things that make us cringe a little bit, and everybody has to start somewhere. But if someone asks you to teach a class and you don't know what tools you would use, I would recommend saying thank you for thinking of me. Let me think about it for a little bit and figure out, what it is that you are going to use to teach. We did hear a story about someone teaching, and they had gotten pens and they got nibs, and it was the day before their class, and the nibs didn't fit into the pen holders. They didn't know what to do. This was in a calligraphy group, so they sent out a SOS, like, what do I do here? And what they actually ended up doing was wrapping toilet paper around the nibs to get them to fit into the pen holders. And while that solved their problem of having class, like, that's what they gave to people to introduce them to the art.
So people who have no idea about calligraphy, nibs, pens, you're showing them something that actually doesn't work together in theory. So, I mean, you're just making it work, but it's not the best to give to someone for their very first experience. So right. I would recommend getting your supplies lined up before the night before, for sure, so that you have time to order something else if it doesn't fit in the pen holder, for definitely.
Right. So having an idea of the curriculum and the tools that you're going to use is something that you should absolutely have lined up before you start teaching, and in theory before you agree to teach a class. But if someone's asking you to teach something a couple months in advance, you can probably agree and get your stuff together before then. But keep that in mind. Very important first step is the curriculum and tools. The next step that you're going to need is that you're going to want to consider is a profit analysis, and in turn a budget. So I feel like there's a lot of people who just kind of make up a number of what they're going to charge people without actually thinking about how much profit they're going to make. So we're running a business. If you're teaching calligraphy, you're probably running a business too, and you want it to be profitable. Someone once asked us, how are you making any money? And I think that they might not have been making money because they were charging very little for their classes.
Well, there's two different ways that you could do workshops. You can host them yourselves and charge by the individual and pay the vendors involved. So like you pay the venue and that goes into your budget. Or you can be hosted by a venue, they collect the money and they pay you, which could also go a couple ways. They could pay you a flat fee, which I don't recommend, or they could pay you by the person. So if they're charging $200, I would recommend asking for at least 50% of that, since you have to do all the work and stand up there and it's your reputation on the line, and all they're doing is providing the venue. So at the very least 50% of the profit should be going to you. I don't recommend doing a workshop for a flat rate of
$200 to $300.
$300. You will not make money doing it like that. So
just doing some kind of analysis of the profit. And so when you have to take into consideration all of the factors that are going into it, which takes us to the number 3 thing you definitely want to consider. And this is actually the hardest part about hosting a new workshop for us, is finding a venue that can accommodate your class. So we teach classes in our studio here in Old Town Alexandria, the DC area. People travel from all around nearby to take our classes, but we also travel. And we've been doing that since actually the very beginning. We started with that class at Carson Butler Studio in DC, but we immediately were going to New York and LA and Texas, and I don't know, that first year we went a ton of places. I don't know what we were thinking.
Anywhere anybody asked, yes, we were 5 years younger. Anywhere anyone asked, we would try to go.
Right. But it's difficult to find a venue that can hold a number of people that will make it profitable for you. But also there has to be a certain amount of space. So if we're talking about a writing course, people have to be able to move. In the early days, we did have venues that were not ideal because we hadn't been to them. We didn't know what kind of space to be asking for, and people were like this close to each other trying to write.
Right.
And that wasn't
ideal.
Good.
But you make it work. If that's the case, there's always a solution to every issue that's come up. Thank goodness.
We've made it work at every place that we've been, but finding the venue can be difficult, and finding a venue that isn't going to charge you like wedding venue prices. So it being in the wedding industry, that's the first place we look, hotels, wedding venue type situations, but they usually want to charge a lot of money. So if you have a friend, like a stationer, a photographer, or someone that has a studio space and they're offering to let you use it, that is great. Definitely go there and see how many people you can fit in the space. You want to have enough room between your tables to be able to walk around. But the venue is definitely something that you want to consider before you announce to the world that you are going to be having your class. You should have your venue lined up. So the next thing actually is what venue is part of, and that's your overall logistics. So it's not just the venue, it's not just the course materials. You also have to think about everything else that's going to go into it, whether you're traveling or hosting it in your own studio. And so that's your logistics. So number 4 item to keep in mind is your logistics overall. So that would include things like rentals. So you have to have tables and chairs. So if somebody says, we want to host you and in our space, we'd love for you to come teach in our space, like, okay, do you have tables and chairs, or can you rent them, or do I have to rent them? And if you have to rent them, how much is that going to cost you? We've never been anywhere where rentals cost us less than $300 to $600.
Right.
Especially because they have delivery fees, and then you have to coordinate with the venue when the tables and chairs are going to be delivered.
And then if it's on a weekend, sometimes they have off-hour fees,
right.
And like having it delivered the day of can be a little bit challenging and also scary because you have to do all the setup the day of. But sometimes you just can't get in the night before. So it can be stressful thinking about the logistics, and it's good to plan in advance.
Right. But if you're going to be hosting something locally and the person that you're partnering with has a space with tables and chairs, so it doesn't have to be a production, but just think about if you're traveling somewhere, these are all the things that you want to consider. A lot of people do much smaller classes. That was one of the reasons that we have 2 teachers, because we can do a larger class and still have that one-on-one attention because both of us are teaching. But these are just things to keep in mind. So the rentals, also snacks. If you have people for 3 hours, some people do full day intensive workshops. You definitely would want to feed them more than once if you're doing something like that.
Right.
Water,
or
treats,
like a full lunch and a break.
Lunch. So just thinking about the food. If you're going to make it, if you're going to have any decor, flowers, things of that nature. So just taking all of the logistics into account and making sure that you plan for all of those is really important. So then the 5th item is your marketing. So you have to think about who is going to come to your class. So you want to make sure that you have a way to reach people. So do you have an Instagram account with followers who will support this or who want to learn from you, or people asking you to teach it? If so, that's great, but also keep in mind that let's say you have 100 people who are telling you that they want to come learn from you.
Are they all
available on that date?
Are they all at that location?
Right.
We have so many people tell us they want us to come to a city, and then you release the city and you don't always get immediate signups. So
right.
Keep in mind that not everyone who's asking for a workshop is going to actually be able to come to your workshop or be willing to pay what you're asking for your time and expense in hosting a workshop. So all important to keep in mind.
Right. We mentioned Instagram. Also, if you have an email list, that's definitely, you want to send your email list once you release classes. If you are going to do a few, if you just want to jump all in and release 5 at a time, having the different date options will help have more people sign up. But just keeping in mind that you have to have a way to let people know that they can sign up for your class, so your marketing. There's definitely a lot more that goes in. I mean, there's just so much that goes into planning workshops. But these are just 5 quick things that you definitely want to consider when you are deciding if you are ready to start teaching, or if someone has asked you to teach a class. Keep these things in mind as you are agreeing to it or declining it if you don't think it's the right fit for you right now. So just to wrap up, the 5 things that we think would be helpful for you to consider are having your curriculum and tools in place, doing a profit analysis and in turn a budget for the class, thinking about your venue, the space, finding it, the cost of it, they kind of all play in together, the rest of your logistics, and then lastly the marketing for your course and or your class, and how you're going to actually reach people that want to come and learn from you.
Yes, so I hope that was helpful for you guys. I'm sure that there will be questions about what we talked about, so feel free to ask us anything below. Like the video if you liked it. We hope you did. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on our next video, and we'll see you back for the next time we do another couch chat.
Bye.
Bye.